Hello everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. This is Shan Konduru. Today I want to introduce you to a book related to spirituality and self-awareness genre. The book I'm going to talk about is Autobiography of a Yogi, written by Parama Hamsa Yogaanada. This is a spiritual memoir and autobiography. Paramahansa Yogaanada was well-known Indian Hindu monk, yogi and guru. Swamiji introduced millions to the meditation and Kriya Yoga through his teachings. In year 1920, Swamiji started a non-profit organization called Self-Realization Fellowship, SRF, to disseminate his teachings on the ancient science of yoga and its tradition of meditation. Swamiji also established another organization called Yoga Sri Yukteswara Society, YSS, in the name of his spiritual teacher Sri Yukteswara. The purpose of this organization is to carry on the work of imparting the teachings of Kriya Yoga and the spiritual ideals and practices taught by Swamiji and his guru Sri Yukteswara. The book was first published in 1946. Since then millions of copies were sold worldwide. The book is a memoir of Swamiji's life and spiritual journey, starting with his childhood in rural India and culminating in his years as a monk and teacher in the United States. Throughout the book, Swamiji shares stories of his encounters with various spiritual figures, both in India and the West. Swamiji also talks about his guru Sri Yukteswara's interaction with Mahatma Gandhi in 1935, and the Nobel Prize-winning physicist, Dr. Albert Einstein, in 1920. According to Swamiji, Gandhi was deeply impressed by his teachings on Kriya Yoga and asked questions inquisitively to learn more about it. Swamiji describes Mr. Gandhi as a great soul and a true yogi, who was deeply spiritual and had a profound understanding of the inner self. They had a deep conversation and Swamiji states that they both had a strong connection and Gandhi requested him to come back and teach him more about Kriya Yoga. Swamiji also describes his meeting with Dr. Albert Einstein in the book. Swamiji states that he met Einstein in the late 1920s in California, where Einstein was visiting as a guest of the Caltech physics department. Swamiji describes Einstein as a great scientist and a deep thinker, who was fascinated by spiritual and philosophical questions. Swamiji states that Einstein was particularly interested in the concept of time and the relationship between science and spirituality. Swamiji claims that Einstein expressed a desire to learn more about yoga and meditation, and that he gave him some pointers on how to meditate. Swamiji describes several steps or practices that one can follow to attain self-realization, which is the ultimate goal of spiritual life according to him. Finding a guru or spiritual teacher. In this he emphasizes the importance of finding a guru, or spiritual teacher, who can guide one on the path to self-realization. He writes that a guru can provide the necessary knowledge, guidance, and inspiration for one to progress on the spiritual path. Practicing Kriya Yoga. He describes Kriya Yoga as a spiritual practice that involves the control of breath and energy centers in the body to attain spiritual liberation. He writes that by practicing Kriya Yoga, one can attain a deep state of meditation, which leads to self-realization. Cultivating devotion and surrender. He writes that devotion and surrender are essential for attaining self-realization. He explains that one must develop a deep devotion to God and to the Guru and must be willing to surrender one's ego and desires to the divine. Practicing detachment and non-attachment. He states that one must learn to detach oneself from material possessions and desires and focus on the spiritual path. He writes that non-attachment helps one to overcome the illusion of the ego and attain self-realization. Developing a strong willpower, he writes that having a strong willpower is important for spiritual progress. One must be able to control the mind and overcome obstacles and distractions that may arise on the spiritual path. Practicing meditation, he writes that meditation is essential for attaining self-realization. He explains that by meditating regularly, one can gain control of the mind and attune oneself to the divine. Following a spiritual lifestyle, he states that living a spiritual lifestyle is important for attaining self-realization. He writes that one should follow a simple and pure lifestyle, avoid negative influences and bad company, and surround oneself with positive and uplifting influences. He also writes about some of the challenges he encountered in the path of attaining self-realization. Overcoming the ego, he writes that the ego is the greatest obstacle to self-realization, as it creates the illusion of separation from the divine and prevents one from experiencing the true self. He writes that one must learn to detach oneself from the ego and overcome the sense of individuality in order to attain self-realization. Dealing with skepticism and resistance, he writes that many people are skeptical of spiritual teachings and may resist or oppose them. He writes that one must be able to deal with skepticism and resistance in order to progress on the spiritual path. Controlling the mind, he writes that the mind is constantly distracted and pulled in different directions, making it difficult to focus on the spiritual path. He writes that one must learn to control the mind through meditation and willpower in order to attain self-realization. Overcoming fear and doubt, he writes that fear and doubt can be major obstacles on the spiritual path. He writes that one must learn to overcome fear and doubt by having faith in the Guru and the spiritual path, and by trusting in the divine. Finding the right Guru, he writes that finding the right Guru can be a difficult task and it's not always easy to find a true spiritual master. He writes that one must be able to recognize the signs of a true Guru and be willing to follow his guidance in order to attain self-realization. Overcoming the obstacles of daily life, he writes that the difficulties and obstacles of daily life can be major hindrances to spiritual progress. He writes that one must learn to overcome these obstacles by following a spiritual lifestyle, and by being mindful of the spiritual path always. The book is considered as a masterpiece of spiritual literature and is widely read and respected by spiritual seekers and those interested in yoga, meditation, and Eastern philosophy. It is also considered as an important work for the study of the history of the spread of yoga in the West. I personally like Swamiji's engaging writing style and his ability to bring ancient wisdom to a modern audience through his compelling and fascinating storytelling style. Another interesting aspect is while dealing with such a serious matter, Swamiji embedded subtle humor and levity in making the dry subject matter more approachable and light-hearted. I also like the way Swamiji used vivid and imaginative metaphors to illustrate his point of view and making them easier to understand, remember and relate to oneself. Overall, The Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahansa Yogaanada is a spiritual classic and is a popular choice among those interested in spirituality, yoga, and Eastern philosophy. The book provides an in-depth look at the author's personal experiences and encounters with spiritual leaders and offers insights into the teachings of yoga and meditation. Consider showing support for this YouTube channel by hitting the like button, subscribing, sharing with others, and click on bell icon for getting future notifications.